Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Beyond the Pain, Heart and Home Healing After Loss. I am doing something a little bit different today. I've done this once before, and I'm going to do it again because, well, a couple of reasons. First of all, I've been having a pretty emotional, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks here, especially the last few days, just with my grief, a few personal things going on, but mostly my grief, just kind of missing my daughter and things like that. But also, you know, I'm very present on social media, if you don't know that, especially on my Instagram. And, most of Instagram it's just very scripted. Like, even if you put something out there that's very real and raw, there's still thought behind it. You still have to put some sort of caption to it. Like, in general, like intrinsically, social media is just a little bit scripted. And, but I, the life that I live is very raw and just unscripted sometimes. And so one of my favorite parts of being in I'll say public eye, whether it's on social media or now through my podcast and things like that, is I really like connecting with people. And I really like having one-on-one, real, raw conversations with people. And a lot of that can't happen if everything that you put out there is scripted. So I have zero script. I have zero plan for being behind the mic today. I do have a specific topic I want to talk about and share my heart with, but I have literally nothing in front of me. I have no notes. I have nothing. I just want to talk. And what I want to talk about is just kind of where I'm at right now, like with my grief journey, but also, a specific topic. I kind of just want to mention, because I throw it in like here and there on social media and here on the podcast that, my husband, Rick, and I, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure you do, but we're at almost 2.5 years ago now. Our daughter was stillborn. We tried for literally on and off for 6 years to get pregnant, watched all of our family and friends get pregnant, through that time, have successful babies, not all of them, but have, lots of living babies. And finally, it was my turn to get pregnant. I had a super healthy pregnancy. Me and the baby were healthy the whole time. And then after that, at 39 and a half weeks, the doctor couldn't find a heartbeat, and then she ended up being stillborn. And so that's like the very quick version, and then we went through a lot of traumatic things with my husband's health in and out of the hospital. That's a very, very quick version of the story. But now that we're past all that, my husband, Rick, and I, we still want to get pregnant, we still want to try to have our own successful living child. Another small piece of our story is we have custody and raise 3 children who are not biologically ours. So we do have kids in the house, but they are not biologically ours. And so, I've just been kind of feeling lately, I post a lot on my social media. I'm becoming the best version of myself. What I've decided to do, after this very, very traumatic time in our lives, and this, devastating loss that we've suffered, I've decided that I'm not going to let this pain determine what my future is going to look like. Yes, I miss my daughter like freaking crazy. And there are days where, I thought for sure I wasn't going to get emotional, but there are days where I would give literally anything to have her back. But I have decided that the best way that I can honor her is to live my life, the one that is out of hers and mine. I'm the only one here that can speak on her behalf and live on her behalf. And so, I've decided that even though the pain is so freaking deep, that the way that I can honor her is to not live my life as a mess, on the floor every day, but to learn how to take power over my pain, as my grief coach has taught me so well, and to live the fullest life that I can in honor of her, because she was so important to me. I'm not comparing losses by any means. I really am not. And I'm not even comparing child loss to child loss. But there was something just so extra special about her, because she was not only my child, she was an answer to so many prayers from me and a lot of people in my life. I'm not even going to go down that road, but she was an answer to so many of the things that I was struggling with for years. And so when she died, it wasn't just the loss of her, it was the loss of all of those things that I was praying for and weeping for and longing for so many years of my life. And so the loss would have been devastating either way, but it felt extra devastating because of those things, and it rocked my faith and my relationship with God and all of that. But so despite that deep pain, I have decided, and I have made the choice that I don't want to let the deep pain have the final say in my life and be the reason that I turn into this bitter woman and I never do anything, great with my life or anything like that. And part of me is afraid to continue to have that desire to like want another baby. But of course I can't put that flame out, inside of me, even though I'm terrified of getting pregnant again. All I want is to get pregnant again. And that's just part of wanting to get pregnant, like after loss. And it's very real to me. My husband and I think me more than him deal with, those fears. But it's something that I do want, that we are trying to do again, is to, have a living baby successfully. And to have a child of our own. Like I said, we do have kids in the house. And I don't really want to spend this episode talking about their story because it's irrelevant to what I've been feeling these last few days, which is I just want to have my own baby. But it is different, of course. I haven't had them since birth. The youngest was 6 when they moved in, and the oldest was almost 10 years old. That's very different than raising a child from birth. And even though we love them like our own and we care for them every single day as if they were our own, like it's simply different. But the point is to not compare, because I don't think I have to explain why, I still just want my own, my own blood child who is biologically mine. But this journey, it comes with just so many mixed emotions. And I think part of it for me, and honestly, like I'm processing these feelings kind of as I'm saying them out loud. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to jump on here, is because I've had all of these like thoughts and feelings like racing through my mind. And I'm like, I got to get it out. So I hope this can be helpful to someone. And I hope that it can encourage you or resonate with someone to know that, like, even when you're seeing someone take power over this pain, or decide to do something great with their life, like it doesn't mean that like the grief stops or the really hard questions stop. Like I actually just put a reel out today that it's like, even though I've taken like tremendous steps forward and I have made a lot of progress in my healing and in my growth, and I always say like becoming the best version of myself, like there's still a lot of deep crap like that goes on like in my heart and in my brain that I have to deal with, on maybe not a daily basis anymore, but definitely consistently enough where it's like, just because you're on a healing journey and just because you're doing really well doesn't mean that like the pain just goes away completely, or you never have moments of crying at the gym. That's the example that I used today in that reel. It was like I was at the gym and I just literally was on the treadmill and I just started weeping, like, and there's people on either side of me and I don't even know if they noticed. Like I didn't care. I just was in the moment and I just had tears like streaming down my face, and it was just one of those waves that just hit me. But anyways, so this process of grief, it remains. It remains, like, no matter how far along you are in your healing journey, like grief is a lifelong journey in and of itself. Now, it does change and it can get better if you choose to allow it, but it is lifelong. My daughter's never going to be undead. My daughter's never going to not be gone. So as long as she's gone, I will grieve her. And, but it doesn't always have to look this. If I choose to not let it look as painful as it was in the beginning, now and throughout my journey, then that's my choice. But anyways, as I move forward with my life and as I've chosen to take control over this loss and over the pain and not let it be the end of me, that comes with, it comes with a lot of, hard decisions, to make. Like, part of what I struggle with, this is what I started saying before I went on a rant, is like, I love being both things. I love being an entrepreneur, and like, I love working, and I love working on things that I'm passionate about. And if you do follow me on social media, you know that I'm super passionate about women in the home and having, control over your home and having systems and routines in place. And like, I feel like I could build an entire career off of that. And honestly, like, I'm halfway there. and I love that. I love that part of me. And then there's this other part of me that is desperately just wants to never have to work again a day in my life and just have babies on babies, and I do think it's possible to have both. I don't think, people say to me all the time, and honestly, I'm probably going to put something else out about this on social media. People say to me all the time, like, how do you do it all? Like, how do you do it all? And I'm like, I don't do it all. I just pick the things that are really important to me, and I go like full force at those things. And right now in my life, the things that are most important to me are my family's health, specifically my husband and I, because we were struggling, like our health was struggling. It's, my family's health and overall wellness, like over everything. And then it's, creating that life that we have, that Rick and I have always talked about wanting for ourselves. And I feel like the thing that has given us the drive to do that was our daughter's death. It was kind of like, it was a wake-up call. What are we waiting for? What better way could we honor? What better way could we honor this precious little girl that we so desperately wanted to like have in our lives than doing the things that we always said we wanted to do? Be the healthiest versions of ourselves. Bring in wealth, not just so that we could enjoy the spoils, but so that we could bless our families and the people closest to us, and that we could be giving and, give back to people and help those in need, and take in children who needed a place to call home, which we did. And we did that before Layla died. But the point is my husband and I have always had these like really big dreams. And, it wasn't until our daughter's death that it was our wake-up call to like say, like, what are we waiting for, And the reason I bring that up is for me, it's always like a back and forth, I always struggle. Like, do I want this life of like entrepreneurship and like working and like building wealth? It's like, or do I just want to be a mom and I want to be, barefoot in the kitchen 24/7 with a baby on my hip? And that dream is still so big for me. And honestly, I do believe that you can have both. I think it definitely comes with sacrificing in some areas, and you have to work hard and you have to decide what is important to you and literally say no to everything else. And so I do think that life is totally possible. But after loss, that life of being barefoot in the kitchen with a baby on my hip 24/7, like, just feels so far away. Because it was like, you're teased with it. I was tempted with it. It was like, that's what I always wanted. It was actually, I decided I was going to go the entrepreneurship route because like we weren't getting pregnant. I was like, well, you know what? And we had the kids in the house, but they were old enough that it wasn't like, you're chasing a 2-year-old around the house all the time. So they were self-sufficient enough that I had the time and energy to be putting into working and making money and, listening to podcasts on how to, buy businesses and buy real estate, like all of those things. Like, that is the route I eventually went. And once I started doing that, that is when I found out that I was pregnant. And it was in that moment, and in that moment of in my life, like just in general, that I realized, like, oh my God, being pregnant is actually what I really want, you know? And of course, you know, I had 9 amazing months with her. And when she died, it was like, and I didn't realize this right away, but now every time I go to step back towards that dream, you know, it's met with like this, but is it possible? You know, thought, is it possible to have that life that I've always wanted? Because I haven't done it successfully yet, you know? And I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but you know, I was never really given an exact reason as to why she died. You know, it's not like I had this crazy disorder or, you know, there was this like one thing that they could pinpoint. Like my doctor was literally never able to give me a reason. Now, I've done my own research and I know that there are things there are things now that if I do ever get pregnant again, that I will be way more cautious of and vocal about because I've had a loss. But that was my own research. My doctor has never really given me an actual answer as to why this happened. But anyways, because I don't really have an answer, it kind of all feels like I'm leaving it up to chance, you know? You know, we are trying to get pregnant. Like we are currently trying to get pregnant. And it's a scary thing. You know, it's a scary thing to like willingly walk into. And I used this analogy once to my mom, I think it was. And it was about like bungee jumping. And you know, people literally pay thousands and thousands of dollars or is it skydiving or we'll use bungee jumping. Or did I use skydiving? I don't remember. Either or, it doesn't matter. I guess we'll use bungee jumping as this, you know, example, but you could use either. People pay money to do this, to experience this thrill, you know, to get that high of like doing something crazy and, you know, experiencing these crazy moments in life or whatever. So people pay to do this. And you know, when you are done with it, you tell everybody like, oh my God, do it. Unless you're like crazy afraid of heights, which I don't know why you would do it in the first place if you are afraid of heights. But you're probably, if you enjoyed it, going to go tell your friends like, oh my God, you have to do this. You have to do this, you know? And so for most people, like bungee jumping, like you do take a risk, you know, like your cord could snap or, you know, you could plunge head first into the rocks below you. I don't know. I will never bungee jump, so I will never know exactly what the risks are, but my logical brain can figure it out. Like these are the risks. And so I compare that to like getting pregnant. You know, people say all the time to me, well, not all the time, but often to me, like, you know, I know what's going to happen for you, or like, I still want this to happen for you. And I appreciate that. And I am still very hopeful. And it is very much still what I hope for and I pray for and I long for. But this analogy of bungee jumping, it's like, it's a lot harder to bungee jump when you have experienced the cord breaking on you. You know, when they list off all of the risks that come with bungee jumping and you're like, those are probably never going to happen. But then you're that one person that it happens to. Like getting back in that plane or on that mountain or wherever the frig you bungee jump off of is like a lot harder when you have experienced your cord snapping. And so it takes a lot of courage to try to get pregnant again when you've dealt with baby loss or child loss. So if you are somebody who is trying to get pregnant after loss, like you are one of the strongest women out there. Because it takes a lot of courage, and you kind of just have to do it fearfully. You know, I'm not saying like you have to be afraid all of the time, but God, if there's a woman out there listening to this who had a stillbirth and then proceeded to try to get pregnant after that with no fear present whatsoever, like I need to meet you. So please reach out because I want to know how you did it. I don't know if it's possible, you know. I don't know if it's possible to walk back into something like this without having any fear. I know that is certainly not my case. I say this all the time. I am like deathly afraid to get pregnant again. But I'm also like super afraid to never get pregnant again because it's been like my lifelong dream. So when you're stuck in this decision of, well, I'm afraid to and I'm afraid not to. It's kind of like, well, let's throw caution to the wind and just go for it, and it's not really throwing caution to the wind because I am a healthy person. I did have a healthy pregnancy. Like, it was a fluke, quote unquote. Like, I really don't think that's true, but I guess there's a possibility. My doctor didn't have an answer for me. But jumping into this it's hard. But I remain hopeful. I do. I remain very hopeful. And my husband is so much of my strength. And honestly, he is very passionate about it too. Like, I asked him one time, this was like months and months ago. I was like, I'm not saying this is true, but what if I said to you, like, I didn't want to get pregnant again? Like, I just want to know what your thoughts are. And he was like, well, obviously, like, I wouldn't be mad, but I would be really disappointed. And in that moment, I was like, crap, that means I have to try. And of course, that's not what he was saying. Like, he would never force me to do that if I really was that afraid, which, but his passion and his desire to try for another baby, sometimes is what keeps mine alive. My passion and my desire, because it's a scary thing. And, on the flip side of that, I was actually just talking to a really close friend about this. Because I only open up to people who I think really care, who want to hear this. I've seen a lot of women put their hope, like all of their hope and all of their literal and figurative eggs in one basket. And it's in this hope of having their own child, and I've seen lots of women put everything they have into becoming a mother of a living child, or to become a mother of another living child, like after loss. And then it doesn't happen for them because we live in the real world where there is sickness and disease or infertility or whatever the issue is. Like, it just doesn't happen for them. And they're some of the most broken, bitter people. And I don't want to be that person. I think that's why we are very much cautioned to not put, God cautions us to not put our hope, our everything into things that can die. I think that's part of the reason why my daughter's loss was so devastating for me, is because I put so much of myself into her existence. I think at the time I felt like she completed me, and without her, I wasn't good enough. I genuinely think that that's why that loss, I mean, it would have been devastating no matter what, obviously. But like I said, she wasn't just, we got pregnant, randomly. She was prayed for, she was longed for. There were other issues I was having in my life that I was like, if I just had my own child, it would, fix a lot of these problems. So I put all of my faith and all of my hope and all of my desire into a baby. And so when she died, all of those things, went with it. And that's why it felt like such a betrayal from God, is because I didn't just lose her. I lost all of those hopes and all of those things that I put in her existence. And first of all, that's too much pressure on a child. Sorry. It's too much pressure on a child, but I think that's why, I know that's why now that God cautions us so fiercely to not put our hope in things of this world. because they can die and they can disappear, and you can lose your wealth, and you can lose loved ones, and you can lose, your whatever that you're putting your hope in that isn't God. And this is not supposed to be a spiritual episode by any means. My goal was to not turn it into that, but I was just sharing this with a friend, and the reason I'm bringing that up is because even though I remain super hopeful in becoming pregnant again, and I remain expectant, and I'm hopeful, and I hope, I want it. My desire is still there. I have very, very consciously decided that I'm not putting my everything into having my own biological child anymore. Because God forbid that doesn't ever happen for me, or God forbid I experience another loss. I don't want that to be the end of me. I have so much more to offer this world than just having a child that stays alive after I deliver her. I have so much more to offer that, and I'm not making light of the loss by any means, but I guess if there's any, woman out there listening to this, or just anybody who has all of their faith and hope into something, and maybe for you it's having that living child, I just encourage you to find peace in your heart. Find a place in your heart to replace that with peace of knowing that if this doesn't happen for me, I'm still enough. I still have enough to offer this world, even without that child, even without that spouse, or without that, I don't even know, that wealth, whatever you're going for that you feel will complete you. Even without that. But for me, I can only speak to the experience of speaking to moms who have lost a child. Even without that living child, you are enough. And whether you have more living children or not, you will always be a mother. I struggle with that a lot, actually, because I have these 3 children that I raise, but I'm not their mother. I'm mom, and I raise them, but I'm not their mother. I am a mother, and I will always be Layla's mother. But that mothering role feels invisible sometimes for me. And when you have that deep longing passion to just be a mother, when you're fostering, or, you have children that aren't biologically yours, or you've lost a child, that invisible mother role, that is a heavy weight. That is a heavy, heavy weight. And so if that's also something that you're struggling with, I know what that feels like. I know how hard and how heavy of a weight that is. And so, but like I said, I am very hopeful. We are continuing to try to get pregnant. Month after month it's hard, seeing that negative test, or the period comes when you are hoping it won't, or I've been wearing this Aura ring that I have now that I really love. It's a wellness ring, and it tracks all things that can show you when you're the most fertile and all those things. And so I'm very diligent about it, and so when my temperature drops, and that means I'm not pregnant, those kinds of things, month after month, it's not only sad because I'm not pregnant, it's a monthly reminder of every time my period comes, and I'm just getting real with you now, it is the biggest mix of sadness and relief. I get really sad that I'm not pregnant, and I get really relieved that I don't have to be afraid for the next 9 months. And even though I just so desperately want to have another baby, there's so many layers to it. There are so many layers to it. And these are the things that people don't see, which is why I felt really passionate about coming on here and just kind of talking just very, very in just a very real way, unscripted, because these are the things that aren't really said out loud a lot, but they're very real things that women struggle with, especially women who have lost babies. And so I was also listening to a couple other podcasts recently, and I'm sure that's what's triggering a lot of this. And on top of it, like, Easter is just, it's a very reflective time because well, April is the month that I found out that I was pregnant. So it kind of just feels heavy in general. But Easter is a time where we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. And for me, the reason I can find hope any day of the week after such a devastating loss is because of the Easter story, you know? And so Easter just feels heavy in general. It's a very, very strong, it's the time of year where that grief and that joy feels the strongest. And if you've never heard that before, it's like, you know, grief and joy, like, they can exist simultaneously. Like, and you, until you experience it, like, I don't know how to describe it to anybody. It is the weirdest feeling, but it's not just like you can only feel one or the other. You are not just only sad or only happy, you know, or experiencing the grief and the joy. Like, they can literally exist 1000% full force at a time. They can exist, and you can feel them both simultaneously. And for some reason, Easter has just been that for me, because it's the grief to know that, you know, that she's not here, but it's that joy of knowing that, like, I will get to see her again. It's going to be a while, hopefully. Well, that's another thing that loss has done for me, is it has made me less afraid of death, because I know who's waiting for me on the other side. But I would like to stick around here a little bit longer. So, but I know that I will see her again one day. And so it's that grief and joy, it's that mix. But like I said, I had also been listening to some other podcasts, you know, just about grief, and with other women who have, you know, lost babies and things like that. And so this has just been, you know, super heavy on my mind. And another thing that has been kind of hard for me to process, I guess, is knowing that, like, you know, because this life that I'm living right now, and I'm nowhere near, I talk a lot about, like, growth and my healing journey and becoming my best self, but I want to make very clear to everybody listening, like, I am in no way saying, like, I am my perfect self and my life is perfect now. Like, that is not what the message is. And I hope that's not what people think I'm saying, because I truly believe that things like healing and wellness and growth, like, all of those things, like, those are, like, lifelong things. Like, I truly believe you're never going to, like, arrive at, like, your fullest potential. I think there are always ways that we can be healing just that much more, or growing that much more, you know, or becoming that much more of a well-rounded version of ourselves. And so I might be the healthiest version of myself that I've ever been, but it certainly doesn't mean that I don't have this much more to go. Like, you know, like a lifelong journey, more to go. And so even though I'm on this journey, so I want to make sure that that's clear, but so I'm on this journey of wellness and growth and health, and I am the healthiest version I've ever been. And I mean physically, mentally, emotionally, like, all of those things are included in health and wellness, you know. I am the healthiest version of myself, and I am the most disciplined version of myself. I am in a lot of ways, I am the best version of myself that I've ever been. Is there lots of room for improvement? Absolutely. And I plan on continuing to improve for the rest of my days. And of course, there's seasons of life where your priorities change, and it's not always going to look like what it looks like right now. But my goal is to always, no matter what season I'm in, or no matter what the circumstances are, to always try to be that best version of myself amongst those seasons and circumstances. But the struggle is knowing that I had to give up a lot, and I had to go through hell literally in order to figure this out for myself. And that is also a daily struggle. And I should have looked this up, but there is actually a term for this. And if you know the term for this, please comment and tell me what it is, because I always forget what it's called, but it's basically like when you have the life that you have and you're really grateful for it and you don't want this life to change, like this version of myself that I'm becoming, like I like this version of myself a lot better than I liked the version before I knew loss. I mean, I miss my innocence sometimes, but the way that I live my life now and my health and even like in my marriage and my relationships, like I much prefer this one now. Other than the innocence, I miss the innocence. But I like this version now, but I would give anything to have like my daughter back, you know, and I would, and so when you wrestle between those two things, it's like if somebody literally walked up to me and was like, would you rather have your daughter back, but you have to go back to the old version of yourself? Or would you rather her stay dead and you get to remain this version of yourself? And that is a real question that people like me have to ask themselves. I don't actually have to answer that question because it will never be presented to me in real life. But don't get it twisted. That is something that is a thought that creeps into probably a lot of grievers' heads, like a lot. I know I'm not crazy because, like I said, there's a term for this and I can't remember what it is. But that is something that I struggle with. And like I said, it doesn't really matter because that choice will never actually be presented to me. But the thought that I even have to, the fact that I even have to wrestle with that thought is hard for me. Because of course I would give anything to have my daughter back. You know, you would give anything to have that loved one back. But I think that's where people get stuck. Is they get stuck trying to think of ways to make things feel like they used to. And instead of, I'm going to use the word embracing this new version of yourself or this new version of the world without that person, they get stuck. And they get stuck in thinking that there's something they can do to make it like it used to be, you know? And unfortunately, like that's one of the hardest parts of loss is like you can't go back. A world where they exist, where they're living isn't here anymore. And the hardest part, the hardest decision we can make is saying that friggin' sucks. That fact that I just said sucks. It hurts like heck. I would do anything to change it, but I can either stop there or I can decide, you know what? In honor of that person, I'm going to pick myself up here and move forward. We don't have to leave them in the past. We can find ways to take them with us as we move forward in our own unique way, whatever that looks like. And we can move forward with our lives and become the best versions of ourselves. And does that come with some, you know, I don't, it's not guilt. It's, you can certainly wrestle with guilt, but guilt is, somebody gave me this analogy. I think it was my friend Shannon. She was on here with the decluttering episode. She said that guilt is not like a bad feeling. It kind of just like points you in the direction of which way you should be going. And I like that because it's like, we can't feel guilty about somebody who's not here. They're not making us feel guilty. And so anytime guilt kind of creeps up for me now, the way that I look at it is kind of like, where is this pointing me? Like if I feel guilty about something, like instead of feeling down on myself, like, okay, what do I need to change to like release that feeling? And so for me, like if I feel guilty that I'm not including my daughter enough, I'm like, okay, where can I include her more? You know, like, I don't let it consume me. I don't let that guilt consume me as I move forward with my life, because if I let that guilt take over, that's me being stuck. That's me saying like, I can't do anything with my life because she's not here. And that's not true. Do I want her to be here? Yes. And I want everybody to know it. I want everybody to know that even though I'm the healthiest version of myself and I'm trying to become the best version of myself, I still want her here. I don't want anybody to think that I'm over it, that I'm over her, that I don't miss her like crazy on a daily basis, that I don't still have complete temper tantrums about her loss, and that I don't still, come into her nursery and just cry. I want everybody to know that I have all of those feelings still. But when you decide to live your life in honor of that person, my grief coach always says, like, you can honor that person so much more in your healing than you ever could in your hurting. Because staying stuck doesn't honor them. It just keeps you stuck. It just keeps you stuck. And so whatever I decide to do from my life here on forward, whether it's get pregnant and continue to build a beautiful family, or, start that business, or, gain that wealth that my husband and I are working hard towards, or, I started this podcast like to help people and to share my story, to make other people feel more heard and seen, and whatever it is, like those are the ways that I am not remaining stuck, and that I'm deciding that like this is how I can move forward with my life. This is how I can honor her with my life by doing all of these incredible things. And it's not easy. Like, it requires a lot of work. You have to want this. If you don't really want this, you're going to look at the work and go, that's overwhelming. Goodbye. And I get it. But through this work is where a lot of joy, that's where I have found my joy again. I literally thought I was never going to smile again. Like, when I reflect on the early days of my loss, I literally was like, nothing is going to be as good as her. Nothing is going to feel as complete as it did when I knew she was coming. But when you put in that work and you decide that you're not going to remain stuck there, you do find joy again. And the funny part about it is in the littlest of things. It is in the littlest of things. And that is why I built my Instagram up to where it is today. I started showing people that, like, I mean, for a while I was doing things like DIY projects and showing you my favorite Scrub Daddy projects and stuff like that. But it morphed into like this deep love of my home where I spend 80% of my time. Like, it formed into this deep love and passion for something of where I spend all my time, and finding other women who are also passionate about, those things. And so I did find joy again. And I've rambled a lot today, but the main point that I felt like I was at least coming on here originally was to just talk about, my journey of getting pregnant again, and just kind of share, like, I guess just where I'm at today with my grief, and that journey, how my grief journey kind of ties into, well, what's next, kind of thing. And so what's next? I don't freaking know. I know I have goals for myself. I have dreams for myself. My husband and I are dreaming bigger than ever, in honor of her. And nothing has driven me more towards these things than knowing that it is tied to her life. And it comes with so many ups and downs still. Like, my moments, my big grief waves, they happened, God, every day probably in the beginning. And then, they start to like calm down a little bit. They don't happen as often. Maybe they went to once a week, and maybe then once a month. And I don't really keep a timer on it, but I still have my moments where I'm like, I cannot believe this has happened. Like, I can't believe this is my life. It almost feels like you wake up like from a nightmare for a few seconds. Like, that's kind of how I describe the grief waves, is like you suddenly become aware that your life isn't a dream, and that it was real all along. And that moment that feeling doesn't last very long. But that's kind of what a grief wave feels like to me. And so I don't know what's next for us. Like I said, I know we have goals and dreams, and And it is my absolute honor to do them all in honor of her. And I hope my story can encourage somebody else to decide to not stay stuck in their pain and to decide that they're going to not allow this really, really deep pain to be the end of an incredible life that they potentially have, in front of them. And so for us, we're continuing to pursue things like getting pregnant and, building health and wealth and working on our healing journeys and things of that nature. And so I really appreciate you guys just let me talk, let me get some things off my chest. I've been feeling the weight of that for several days now, so it honestly just feels good to talk it out. Let me know if you kind of like this forum, or this, this kind of way of podcasting. It's obviously way more, I say unscripted. What I mean by that is I have literally no notes in front of me. I always come to the microphone with some sort of plan or notes or a guest who I'm having a conversation with. This is only the second time I ever come and just rambled. So let me know how you feel about this in the comments, because I appreciate your feedback and I want to make sure that I'm, putting out what you guys really enjoy listening to. So anyways, thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all of the things for more episodes just like this one. I can't wait to chat with you all again really soon, but signing off for now, your hope dealer, Emmy Smaz.